Are you tired of having to use your mouse to click leave every time you want to exit from settlement? Feel like your mouse hand is getting a repetitive strain injury? Introducing the tab key, used to exit some, but not all, scenes and interfaces in the game. Useful for fast exit from settlements onto the world map, despite there being no visible indication of these hotkeys' existence in the game. So, I speedrun Bannerlords, and in this video I want to share some of the small tricks I've learned while trying to go fast in this game. Keep in mind that these won't be like super secret things, they will be mostly very small optimizations, but I don't think they are very common knowledge either. So all of these things are something that I hadn't really thought about before I actually actively tried to go fast. So the first thing I want to talk about is hotkeys, and hotkeys are the key to going fast in any game, and particularly I want to talk about the most important hotkey in Bannerlords, which is enter key. Enter key is super useful. It can be used to close trade menus, barter menus, almost all pop-ups. It is the most useful hotkey by far, I think. But the thing that makes enter key a bit awkward is its position on the keyboard. You see, when you play, one of your hands is on your mouse and the other hand is on the left side of the keyboard. And on the left side of the keyboard there is no enter key. So I think this distance from your natural hand position is a reason why many people don't bother clicking enter, even though it's really useful. But there are ways to fix this issue. So for example, if you have a keyboard with macro buttons on the left side, you could use one of those and find enter there, but I don't think these macro keyboards are very common. So what you could do instead would be, for example, put the second keyboard next to your first one, and then you could press the enter on the second keyboard.
But what are you doing? You don't even have a second set of keycaps.
Okay, well, slightly less junky version of this would be to have a gamepad on the side of your keyboard. This would actually be even preferable in some ways, since the buttons on your gamepad don't always behave exactly the same way as enter key does, but I don't think there is enough of an advantage to using gamepad over just using the enter key. All of these solutions would work, I think, but what I use instead is I remap my caps lock key to enter. Since caps lock is a button that is in very good place and it's kind of useless button, there are many ways to do this remapping. I think Auto Hotkeys is a very popular program that can be used to remap keys, but what I use instead is Microsoft Power Toys, which is an optional extension to Windows made by Microsoft, and it's very simple to use. After you download and install Power Toys, you just go in this menu, and there is this nice UI for doing the remapping. Just make sure that you disable all the features you don't want, because they can be kind of confusing, and they are all enabled by default. One other thing I want to mention is that when you press enter, you open this text box. It can be kind of annoying, but what I suggest is that you just minimize this window and live with it. It's not actually in your way, so you can just ignore it, I think.
Shout out to everyone who thinks 2-controller setups are cool.
So the next thing I want to talk about is hostile recruitment, or force villages to give you recruits. And this is definitely not a secret thing, but I think many people, me included, have overlooked this because of how weak raiding is. Force villages to give you recruits is really good, and I think you should be using it all the time. The main thing that makes hostile recruiting so good is that you get to fight the defenders in the village. And the villages are very conveniently sized, usually 50 to 70 defenders, so you can just auto-resolve these fights very early on in your campaign. It is slightly less good if you don't want to use auto-resolve. So for example, if your party is 100% cons card and you don't want to waste any troops, then I don't recommend hostile recruitment. Of course, the second benefit are the recruits that you get, and it can be quite significant amounts sometimes. If you are already in war with the faction, there are no relation penalties either, so there is really no downside to doing this.
Villages are like large bandit parties, except you can find them everywhere, and they can't run away from you.
So the next tip is how to get rid of your worst soldiers really fast. So let's say you are over your party limit and you want to leave your recruits behind. So what you can do to do this very fast is pressing B to open the party menu, then pressing E to put all your troops on the left side, and then press Q to take all. Pressing take all units will fill your party to its maximum size and leave all the lowest tier units behind. You can also do this after hostile recruitment to make sure that you get all the best troops, and you can also do this when you manage your garrison to get all the best units away from your garrison. I think this is a neat simple trick that can save you some time when you manage your party.
I only recruited these troops so that I could kick them from the party.
My next tip is about leaving combat early. So you might have heard of this kind of cheesy strategy where you let your archers fire their arrows, and then before you take any casualties you retreat and then repeat the whole process. So that's great and all, and it lets you fight much larger armies than your own, but my tip is not really a cheese, but more of a time optimization. So what I would suggest you do is fight however you like until you have overwhelming advantage, and then retreat and auto-resolve the rest. So this has a couple of advantages. On top of being faster, it also gives your low tier troops more XP, since they tend to do better in auto-resolved battles. And since you fought until you have overwhelming advantage, you should not take many casualties in the auto-resolve either. I think you can see how this could be very useful in those common situations where your enemy only has a couple of cavalry running around somewhere and you have no idea where they are. And by the way, all the renown gain, influence gain and loot will be the same whether you retreat from the battle early or not.
A true leader needs to learn when to leave the room, and it's probably much earlier than they themselves think.
The next thing I want to talk about is something that I hope is common knowledge already, but it is such a well hidden mechanic that I want to include it here. And that is, when you are smithing, you can press Ctrl C to save your current weapon, and then when you come back to the smithy later, you can press Ctrl V to paste that weapon in. Just make sure that before pasting, you first navigate to the same type of weapon that you were making before, otherwise your Ctrl V will not do anything. And while we are at the smithing menu, can we talk a bit about how screwed the hotkeys are in this menu? Actually, the only hotkeys that seem to be working in this menu are copy and paste ones and escape to leave. You should be able to press Q and E to switch between characters like you can on the inventory screen. Enter should close this pop-up. There should be something for switching between the tabs like 1, 2 and 3. There should be button for crafting, smelting or refining like spacebar or enter again.
Was the whole crafting interface made by an intern who has been fired long since? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, that is my list of speed tips. Let me know in the comments section if you think I missed something or if you had a particular favorite. In the future, I might do another list if I missed enough stuff or there are new techniques found. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.
Subscribe now, or Tailboats will remove all hotkeys from the game.